Hello, everybody. Good night. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Give me a shout out. Let me know that you are here tonight. Tonight, we're going to continue our sessions on forgiveness. Tonight, we're going to talk about what do we do in cases where there has been infidelity. So I want to start out by saying that we're not going to be bashing or judging anyone who has had an affair outside of a relationship. We want to talk about forgiveness. This is going to be part one. Part two, we're going to talk about what happens when there's a child involved. So there's a child involved in the infidelity. How do we move on? How do we accept that child? How do we forgive? And how do we truly love that child with all our heart? So that's going to be part two. And I'm going to be on with Teresa next week. And we're going to be sharing our story because her son is my children's half brother. And we're going to be sharing our story about our forgiveness, how we truly love each other, how we forgave one another, and how I have accepted her son as if he was my own. And trust me, he loves himself some Mama Lena. So we're going to talk about that more in depth on next week. So again, I'm Lena Lassler. Please say hello. Let me know that you're here with me tonight. I am an advanced grief recovery method specialist. I'm a senior leader in corporate America, and I'm the founder and president of Forever Healed. We are a nonprofit organization. And what we do is we aim to assist those with broken hearts to end their pain and reclaim their lives forever. How do we do this? We do this in several different ways. We do it through grief recovery classes. They can either be one-to-one classes, virtual or in person, and we also hold group grief recovery classes. We also have a class called Helping Children with Loss, and we teach educators and school counselors how to help children who are dealing with loss. We also go into the workplace and corporate, and we conduct seminars and lunch and learns on the hidden cost of grief in the workplace. But more recently, what we have been really proud of is that we have partnered with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, their Victim Witness Services program, and we have been providing our services and our support to families who have lost loved ones as a result of homicide. So this month, and we're actually going to be talking about this again next week, so even next month, we're going to end our session on forgiveness. But tonight, I specifically want to talk about how do you forgive when someone has had an affair in a relationship. Next week, we're going to be talking about what if there was a child born through that infidelity, how do we move beyond that? Hi, Peggy. Nice to see you tonight. Hi, Chastity. Thanks for joining me. Hi, Frizzell. Oh my gosh, how are things going? I miss you already. Thanks for joining me tonight. So again, tonight we're going to be talking about forgiveness. How do we move beyond forgiveness? How do we get to a place of forgiveness when our spouse, significant other, has had an affair outside of that relationship? Again, what do we do when there's a child involved? So next week, part two, we're going to talk about that. I'm going to be on with Teresa Miller. We're going to be on at 5 o'clock. So I just want you guys to know that that'll be an earlier time next week. Hi, Charvette. Hi, Frizzell. Good to see you both. So how do we move beyond our hurt and pain when, again, our spouse, significant other, they have cheated on us? How do we get to a place of healing? So many partners who have been unfaithful and want to salvage the relationship, what they do is they seek to be forgiven, right? And sometimes they want us to do that immediately. So, but partners who have been betrayed, sometimes they're not ready to forgive until the partner who betrayed them understands the pain that has been caused by the act of the infidelity. So keep in mind that infidelity can come in many forms. And it's not always characterized by a sexual relationship. So I definitely want to be clear with that. Hi, Miss Pat. How are you? Good to see you. So again, tonight we're talking about forgiveness. We're going to continue our conversations on forgiveness. Tonight, more specifically, what do we do if our spouse, our partner, has betrayed us with infidelity? How do we get to a place of healing and forgiveness in that situation? Okay, so again, many times partners who have been unfaithful, they want to salvage the relationship, right? And they're seeking to be forgiven, but sometimes they want it almost immediately. But in order for someone who feels betrayed or in that scenario, in order for them to be able to forgive, they want to know that the person who violated them, who disrespected the relationship, understands the pain that has been caused by the act of the infidelity, right? So again, infidelity can come in many forms, right? It's not always characterized by a sexual relationship. So often infidelity occurs in the form of a new relationship outside the primary relationship, right? So people who have been unfaithful may not be aware that they have crossed the line into infidelity. They may also not have had the intentions of harming their partner. But a betrayed partner may come to find their worldview, their sense of safety, their very identity has been shaken. Their foundation has been shaken. The relationship as they know it, it has been shaken. So how do we get to a place of forgiveness, being able to communicate with one another? Hi, Don from California. Nice to see you tonight. How you doing? How do we get to a place of healing and forgiveness? So while forgiveness may be necessary and it is a part of the infidelity recovery, it generally does not occur, guys, in the beginning of the recovery process. So I'm going to say that one more time. While forgiveness may be necessary and it is a part of the infidelity recovery, it generally does not occur at the beginning of the recovery process. Okay, forgiveness typically comes more towards the end of the healing journey. And why is that? Because you have to process everything that has occurred in your relationship. There's a lot of feelings of hurt. And again, the relationship as you have known it, it has been shaken, right? So you have to be able to process those feelings and allow yourselves that time to grieve what was. So the first step is just that. We have to allow ourselves to grieve what the relationship was. So remember, grief is a loss or change in a familiar pattern or behavior. So if someone stepped outside of your relationship, that familiar pattern has been broken, right? There's been a change. There's been a loss. So again, sometimes we attribute grief to death, but what about the loss of that relationship as you have known it? So you have to allow yourself that time to grieve what the relationship actually was. And then number 2, we have to be able to communicate and understand that when there's infidelity in your relationship, you may not receive all the facts of the affair at one time. So usually the person who has been betrayed, they want to know all the facts. They think they do, right? Tell me how it started. Tell me everything about this relationship. They want to know all the facts. But a lot of times it doesn't happen that way. You may get a little bit of the information, and then 30 days later, you may get a second part of the information. And if you cannot communicate without arguing or getting upset or that being a trigger, then a counselor can help lead those successful conversations, okay? So just remember that you have to work, secondly, on the communication skills. So number 1, we're going to allow ourselves to grieve. Number 2, we're going to work on our communication skills with our partners. Number 3 is the forgiveness, right? And forgiveness means that we're going to release ourselves from the pain associated with the act, right? So people may struggle to heal when they are consumed by the pain. So a lot of times we're so consumed in our emotions that we're not hearing we're not processing the information, and we're unable to even reconcile the relationship because of our pain. So when we decide to forgive, remember that forgiveness is for the forgiver. And by forgiving, you are saying, I don't want to carry the burden of this pain any longer. Again, it's not excusing what they have done. It's not saying that you are accepting bad behavior. It's not saying that you are teaching your children, if you have children involved, that you accept what someone has done to you. No, remember, we're going to teach people how to treat us, right? But when we decide to forgive, we're saying, you know what? I don't want to carry the burden of this pain any longer. So it's not excusing the behavior. So we have to get to a place where we want to release the pain so that we can heal, right? So even when a person is able to forgive, they still may not be ready to repair the relationship at that time or any time. So I have forgiven my ex-husband for the affair. I have welcomed, his child, my children's brother, into my life and into my heart. But I didn't want to repair that relationship. Why not? You know what, to be honest, guys, sometimes we know what we're getting ourselves into before we get into the situation. So I knew who I was marrying. I went in with my eyes wide open. And this is why I tell young women, don't think that a male, I don't want to just bash men because there are some females who have had affairs as well, right? Don't think that these individuals are your project. Don't think that when you marry somebody that you can change them. You cannot. And just because you marry someone and they cheated before you married them, and you think because now that we're married, they're not going to cheat because you feel like you can change them, that's not the case. People are not our projects. So I definitely want to make that extremely clear. So for me, when my husband cheated and I found out that there was a child involved, that was it for me, because I couldn't understand how anyone could sleep at night knowing that they had a child out there for 5 or 6 years and you never acknowledged it. I couldn't sleep at night with that because I knew, and I know how it feels to be that child. I couldn't go to my dad's house. I wasn't welcome there. I had to see my dad at my grandmother's house. I had to see my sisters at my grandmother's house. So I never wanted the child to ever feel like I was the one that was preventing him from seeing his father. So again, we're going to talk about that next week, part 2. I'm going to have Teresa on here. Actually, we're going to share our story together, because how do you move on when there's a child involved? That's another piece to this, right? Because I've heard so many people say, well, I can't accept that child because it reminds me of what that person has done. Well, it's not the child's fault. It's not the child's fault. The two adults, carried on and had and carried out this act and had this child. It's not the child's fault. So we're going to talk about that again next week. So even when a person is able to forgive, they still may not be ready to repair their relationship. That's a personal decision. You have to pray and you have to seek God's face, if you are a believer, to determine whether or not you should leave the relationship. I heard clearly. I was able to sever that relationship. I forgave, but I didn't repair the relationship. I didn't want to reconcile the relationship. That is a personal choice. And we have some comments. Yes, ma'am, Miss Pat. That's right, Wendy. We can't change people. Wendy, I still need to talk to you. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It's not the child's fault. Exactly. So the next thing, reconciliation. So reconciliation means the restoration of the relationship. This level is different, again, for everyone, okay? Here's where couples choose to work to create a new relationship that incorporates their prior experience. So sometimes you hear people say, we want to just start a new relationship. We want to just start over, right? So just reconciling, restoring their relationship, building it back up, learning from what happened in the past, but creating a new relationship that incorporates their prior experiences. So reconciliation is necessary to rebuild trust, okay? Forgiveness helps the person forgiving find release from the pain, while trust can also allow the person who was forgiven to find release from the guilt. So I'm gonna say that one more time. Reconciliation is necessary to rebuild trust. Forgiveness helps the person forgiving find release from the pain, while trust can allow the person who was forgiven to release themselves from the guilt. So just like you seeing that individual, or you haven't truly healed, and you guys haven't communicated about the infidelity. So sometimes you looking at them, could be a trigger or something that they have said, right? But at the same time, trust me, if they are remorseful and they see how hurt you are because of that infidelity, them looking at you is also a trigger. They see the pain. And once you are able to forgive, again, that's when that compassion comes in, and you can see the pain. They just want to be trusted again, right? So trust and forgiveness are two different things. So a lot of times we feel like when we forgive, we just automatically, we're going to trust the person. Well, that doesn't happen. Remember, when we're forgiven, we're releasing the pain, right? And then you can start to have compassion. You can hear the story about what happened. How do we get here, right? And now we're going to reconcile. And then you can start rebuilding the trust, because that spouse needs you to trust them, because they're carrying all this guilt, believe it or not, right? So finding a place where forgiveness is beneficial can be a delicate process, y'all. We need patience with both ourselves and our partner. And when we do this, we are more likely to aid the recovery process than forcing the process. Because again, remember, we're unique, we're individual, so we are going to heal, we are going to restore in our own unique way, an individual way, right? So there's no time limit on it. So I just ask, if you were the one who had the affair, be patient with your spouse. Be patient with your significant other. Just be patient with them and allow them to go through that healing process, and try to understand, that they're coming from a place of hurt. And then once they are healed and they're able to forgive, you can kind of get to that place of reconciliation to where they can trust you again. So it's going to take time and patience from both parties. So recovering from infidelity can present an opportunity for both partners to find strength, to grow, right? And how are you going to do this? Through couples counseling. So I strongly recommend couples counseling, again, so that we can communicate, and not only communicate, we can listen and hear one another, how we're feeling and what we're going through, without being so angry and arguing about the scenario. Because as you go on and go along, you're going to hear more details that you may not have heard in the beginning. So I just wanted to hop on here real quick tonight. I promised you guys that we would talk about the marriage, forgiving when there has been infidelity. Part 2 would be talking about what if a child is involved. We're going to share our personal testimony. Teresa is going to come on here with me next week at 5 o'clock. So not at 7, because she has to be to work by 7, at 5 o'clock, to just share our testimony of how we were able to forgive one another, how we have a strong bond, and how I have welcomed her son into my heart, into my family. Okay, so our steps to forgiving when someone has stepped outside of the relationship. Number 1, we're going to allow ourselves to grieve what the relationship was. Allow yourself to go through the grieving process. Number 2, we have to learn how to communicate effectively. Communication means speaking, right? And also listening to our partners to understand what has transpired, to try to understand what they're feeling. Number 3, forgiveness. Forgiveness. We need to release ourselves from the pain, right, of this action. Again, people struggle with this because they feel like they're condoning. You're not condoning. You are saying, I refuse to keep carrying the burden of this pain. And then your fourth step is going to be your reconciliation. This is going to be the restoration of the relationship. Again, this is going to look different for everybody, for everyone, right? Because we're unique and individual. So what that looks like for one couple may be different for another couple. What do I mean by that? Some couples may have to separately go and get healing and then come together. Some couples may find that it's best to do it together. Like we have to do this, couples therapy together and walk through this together so that we can reconcile and restore our relationship. It can be done. Forgiveness does not mean that you're going to repair the relationship, but that's a personal decision that you are going to have to make. But I want to tell you that it can be done. So we have a comment. I've heard that it's good for couples to go to counseling regularly, even if there's no infidelity, just for maintenance sake. Yes, Wendy, I love that. And I do like premarital counseling. I think that it's critical. And I do feel like you should have a trusted advisor that you and your spouse can go to just talk. You know why? Because we grow, we mature, right? So if you got married, I'm just throwing out, if you got married at 21, you're not the same person at 28. You're not who you was at 21. So sometimes you have to learn, and grow with one another and say, oh my gosh, this is not the person who I married at 21. And they shouldn't be, right? Because we continue to evolve and grow and mature. So every 10 years or so, we're different people. We have different goals and we're growing. So I think that's a great tip. It's a great comment. Yes. So you always want to go talk to somebody because you're growing and you're maturing, right? So I'm not the same person that that Kevin married, years ago. I'm a different Lena now. So sometimes that it is great just to go talk and to have some maintenance check. Yes, the burden of this pain. I've never heard it put that way. Wow. Thanks, Wendy. So now as I always do, we have a couple more minutes. I just want to open up for any additional comments, questions that you have on forgiveness related to this topic. If you know someone who is struggling in this area, please make sure that you hit the like button, share this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Again, forgiveness is one component of our grief recovery classes. So if you are dealing with this and you're struggling with this, moving beyond your pain as it relates to infidelity, call us and we can work with you so that you can get to a place of healing so that you can restore your relationship if that's what your goal is. Chastity says, sweeping it under the rug is not forgiving. So how do you know that you really haven't gotten over it yet? Chastity, that's a very good point and question. Yes, sweeping under the rug is not forgiving. So a lot of times, again, that's when we just suppress things, right? We try to pretend that all is well and nothing has happened. So no, you have to acknowledge that this has happened. And when you forgive, again, I want to be clear about this. When I say that you forgive, you're saying, I want to release the pain associated with this act. You want to separate the emotions from the act. Now, is that saying that you're still not going to be hurt sometimes because of what happened? Absolutely. You still may hurt, but you don't choose to carry around that anger and that bitterness, any longer. I don't want to do this any longer. And you have gotten to that place when you start to have, again, that compassion word again, right? You start to have compassion for that other individual. You really want to listen to understand, like, how did we get to this place, right? What happened? And you're truly listening to understand, to get clarity and to move beyond, that place of pointing the blame and making them the bad person. So that's how you truly know when you have forgiven, and you get a peace. You just get this sense of peace that you can't even explain it when you have forgiven someone. So hopefully that helped. How do you know if you've forgiven someone? So Peggy, again, you get to a place of peace and you kind of have compassion for that person. So with my ex-husband, So for me, I had to forgive him and understand that he just had such a seared mentality. It was almost as if he was unable to feel, you know, just no remorse. But I started to see like a pattern, like this generational thing within his family, and him not necessarily having a relationship with his father, or his stepfather. And then I just started having compassion, for that, like understanding that he just didn't know how, so, but I felt a sense of peace with it. I felt a sense of peace with my decision. I felt a piece of even forgiving him. So, and I knew I had truly forgiven him because I didn't get that, that stomach, that feeling you get in your stomach, like that pit in your stomach when that person comes around, or you just feel disgusted just to look at him. Because at first, to be honest, just to hear him breathe, can I be totally transparent here? It used to annoy me. I'm like, I hate the way this guy breathes. But but when you forgive, you just have that just sense of peace, that sense of mercy, that sense of compassion, to where I just prayed for him, that God would just soften his heart and just change that seared mentality. So grief is more than losing a loved one to death. Yes, Wendy. Yes, ma'am. So when we talk about grief, we tend to associate grief with losing a loved one, right? Um, and it's not. Grief is associated with 50 plus losses. So one loss is the expectation in a relationship, right? So you don't expect your spouse to have an affair, right? You have all these expectations of what you feel the relationship, is. So you actually grieve what you thought the relationship was going to be. We're going to be married for, however many years, death do us part. It's going to be great, knowing that we're going to have some challenging times, right? But never would I have ever expected my spouse to step out on me. So remember, grief is a change or end of a familiar pattern or behavior. So if you're not used to your spouse going out there having an affair, that's not a usual, behavior or pattern in your relationship, then that's grief. It's a loss. So you start to grieve, what you had expected from that relationship. So that's what that means. Hopefully that helped you. And again, like with my mother, I share that a lot, right? So being abused. So you would expect a parent to protect you and to love you and to care for you, but I didn't have that. So I grieve the loss of what I expected, from a mother. So hopefully that helped. You're welcome, Chastity. Separating the emotions from the act. Yes, good question. Wendy, thank you for being on here tonight. So a lot of times we are looking at that individual at what they did, right? So just like when someone passed away, sometimes if it's a traumatic death, we always remember how they died, right? So in relationships, sometimes if somebody step out within a relationship, you're always comparing them to what they did. And so you're constantly replaying the act in your mind. You're constantly replaying like what they did. So your emotions are tied into that act, right? So you have to separate it. Okay, like, okay, this person had an affair. And once we can communicate and understand like what happened here, like what went wrong, like how did this happen? And you communicate and you're able to listen and hear, try to understand, try to get that clarity, and then you're able to separate your emotions from the act. Because sometimes we can't do that. All we see them as is a cheater. They're just a cheater. They're just a bad person. They're always going to be a cheater. I'm never going to trust them again. So your emotions is wrapped up into the act. But who was that person prior to the act? And if you want to reconcile it, who are they now? Right? So who was this person? Who did you fall in love with? So that's how you have to separate the emotions from the act. And once you start forgiving and you have the apologies and the forgives, then it's easier. It's easier to separate the emotions from the act. Shavette, it's so good seeing you. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, Peggy. So you kind of look at them like a lost soul, right? Yeah, when you start to have that compassion, for them. I want to feel at peace, Don says. I want to let go of the pain that I feel from being hurt by others. This has been very helpful. Oh, Don, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, you do feel a sense of peace. So when you have truly forgiven, you definitely feel that sense of peace. And it's just that peace that just overtakes you. Peggy says she thinks she's going to need a class. All right, Peggy. Peggy says, what if the act keeps repeating so it's hard to separate? So this, again, Peggy, is where you're going to have to do soul searching. I know that you are a believer. You're going to have to seek God's face. Because again, in all transparency with me, I told you guys I'm just going to be transparent so that you can heal, right? So there's truth in healing. There's healing in truth. I'm sorry. So we have to be truthful. With my ex-husband, I knew what I was getting myself into. So I had to take responsibility for that. I mean, I truly did. That was my contribution. I knew what I was getting myself, into. So of course he didn't stop cheating once we got married. He continued on, cheating. But you know what? I laid that foundation. And again, this is my story. Some people didn't do that. Some people went into the relationship thinking that, their spouse wouldn't cheat. But I'm just telling you guys. So again, every situation is different. I went in with my eyes wide open. I'm thinking, well, we're young. He's going to change. We get married. He's not going to do this. And he constantly kept cheating. Well, part of that, Peggy, was because this is the foundation that I allowed. I said, it's okay. I'm going to take you and you're cheating and I'm going to marry you. Right. So again, teaching people how to treat us. And it wasn't until I loved myself more. Because I used to say this, Peggy, what's wrong with him? He got a wife that loves him, who's here, who's working, who's contributing, who's a great mom. Like, what's wrong with him? And I clearly heard the voice say, what's wrong with you? Wow. Why do you feel this is the best for you? That's when I knew I had to love myself more. I had to love my children more. And it was time for me to move on. So if the acts keep repeating itself and you have gone through counseling and, you try to communicate and work through it, and it continues to go on, I say that's when you truly need to get on your face and seek God about what you should do next, because some people do change. And I truly believe that. I believe that some people can and some people do change, and they want to. But for those who keep repeating the act, we have to be honest with ourselves. So for me, this is what I allowed him to do. This is how I taught him how to treat me. And what if he or she is a narcissistic? Yeah. Again, personal conversation that you have to have and prayers, because if they are, then, you may find yourself in a situation where you are released, to move on, sweetheart. Because again, if you have tried the counseling and, you've gone through the group, counseling, this person just refuses, this is where you have to, again, teach people how to treat you and ask yourself, if this is where you should be. And again, pray and don't move until you do get your answer. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Charvette. Thank you. Hey, Cassandra. Yeah. But with no apologies or remorse. Yeah, Wendy, it is difficult to forgive. And sometimes they're angry with what they have done. And again, when they see our hurt, it reminds them of what they're done. So a lot of times they're angry with, with themselves. But some people, there is no apology or remorse. I have to say, my ex-husband did call me, years later, and he did finally apologize, to me, and it felt heartfelt. So what I could say was, okay, God, you heard my prayer, because I was praying for this man's heart, because I didn't want him to continue to do this, to other women. But it is hard. It's hard when there's no apology or remorse. But you know what? We have to go into the state of mind of forgiving without that even being an expectation. My mother has never apologized to me, never, and she never will. But I don't expect it anymore. But we still speak. We're cordial. We are rebuilding our relationship. But I know, Wendy, that I don't expect to get that apology or remorse. But that forgiveness, again, was for me choosing to drop that baggage and not carry it. Yeah. Wendy, you a mess. Wendy, everybody tried to tell me about him. I didn't listen. Thank you, guys. Okay, and then Pat says, right, we must forgive, learn to love ourselves before we can move on to another loving relationship. And Selena, right, we can't carry old baggage to a new relationship. Yes, Miss Pat, because remember, at a very early age, we're not taught how to lose things, right? So if you guys remember, you're probably tired of me saying this to you, but remember when you were a kid, you hurt yourself, you scrape your knee, what happens? Your parents will cook for you, right? You lose a pet, what happens? We buy another one. And then we learn to eat to cover our pain. And then we learn to replace to cover our pain, right? And then your heart gets broken, and we love to tell people, oh, they're lost. It's more fish in the sea, right? And then we learn to replace people with people. And we have to teach people how to treat us, but we have to learn how to lose things. We're taught how to acquire them, but no one teaches us what to do when we lose them, because we don't want to talk about grief. We don't want to talk about our pain because it's uncomfortable. And we're not trained on what to say, right? So a lot of times we just keep replacing people, and you know what? And you end up with the same person, right? Just different names, because we haven't been taught to just love ourselves, sit in that pain, and know that you don't deserve that. And you have to love yourself more. So yes, but we have to teach people how to treat us. I'm so glad that you guys have asked for this topic. I thought it was a great topic to discuss on forgiveness. So don't forget that we're going to have part 2 on next Monday at 5 o'clock. I'm going to have Teresa here, and we're going to be talking about our journey of forgiveness, becoming friends, being pregnant at the same time by my ex-husband. I want you guys to come on, show her some love, and we're going to be, again, open and transparent. So what do you do if the infidelity has led to a child outside of your marriage? How do you forgive? How do you move on? How do you welcome that child into your heart? Notice I said not just into your family, but how do you truly welcome that child into your heart through forgiveness? We're going to talk about that next week. So again, like this video, share it, please, with anyone who is struggling in this area, and then tell them to check us out next week. If you know of anyone who's struggling with accepting a child that was born outside of their marriage, we're going to talk about that in more in depth on next week. You guys have been great tonight. I said I was going to hop off here in 20 minutes, but a lot of great questions have come in and comments. So thank you guys for being so live tonight. So I will see you next week, 5 p.m., peaceful rest. And remember to walk in your forgiveness. It's for you. I love you guys. Peaceful rest, and I will see you next week. Bye.